Another season is upon us. Freshmen arrive wide-eyed with dreams of future glory, while seniors prepare for their last chance at immortality. There are only a handful of these opportunities in a man's life, a handful of chances to distinguish yourself from the rest. It's on these fields where history is made, where legends begin and heroes triumph. Traditions tell the story of what you represent, of those that forge the legacy you uphold. When you come charging out of the tunnel, 100,000 people will be watching your every move. How you respond to that pressure is what defines you. These are the moments that reveal your toughness, your determination, and your pride. The Roughnecks on the Sooner Schooner. Ralphie charging out of the gate. And Chief Osceola planting his spear. The time has come. Your time is now.
I think the people can agree that while March Madness has been a good time, the people yearn. The people yearn for spring football. The people yearn for March content. And we got both here on the channel tonight, joined by my co-host, Reed Napper. Buddy, how are you doing tonight, my guy?
Jake, you prefaced it perfectly. Basketball season is essentially over, which means it's springtime. Football is right around the corner, aka 5 months away. But there's never an off season in the sport, as we've said multiple times on the program. There's never an off season in the sport.
Yeah, and it's certainly true. There is no such thing as an off season in this sport. And even though, as you mentioned, Reed, 5 months away from the regular season starting up, it feels like with all the spring activity that we're getting, it feels like it's just around the corner. And I can't wait soon enough for this 2026 football season to get there. But alas, we have to wait a little bit more. But a lot happening since this last week, since the last time that we were live here on College Football Red Zone, your exclusive home for 7+ hours of commercial-free college football. The MAC has finally had the audacity to release a schedule. So we now have a schedule to react to. Appreciate the boys over in the MAC League office. I did put that phone call in so that we can all have a schedule to look at. But then we also move on to the ACC tonight. It's going to be some interesting conversations about the ACC going into this season. So we're going to delve into that, give our rankings from a 1 through 17 perspective. No record prediction, but we're still going to have a good time, and we're going to deep dive in tonight. I'm very excited to do it with my co-host. So with that being said, guys, if you are excited as we are, make sure you go ahead and do a couple of things for me. Hit that like button, and then also hit that subscribe button if you happen to be brand new to the channel as well. And then, of course, if you're watching on Twitch or on Twitter right now, really appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. And Reed, one of the institutions have released their schedule, a Midwestern institution. We finally have a schedule to react to, and that completes basically all of the schedule reveals as of right now.
Yeah, aside from the Louisiana Tech debacle, which we still don't know about, shout out to the MAC, pretty much the only conference left that has regionality between the teams in Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, and then Sacramento State, the newcomer. Obviously excited to talk about them, see how they're going to fare in stepping up to the FBS level in the MAC. So interested to see your winners and losers of the schedule. But the institution that is MACtion, it can't be overshadowed. It's one of the foundations of college football. It's something I love about college football is weekday MACtion. So excited to see your winners and losers of the schedule.
Yeah, and it's absolutely a Midwestern institution. Might be going through a time of transition. We did see Northern Illinois, did depart this beautiful conference to go be a part of the Mountain West. Evidently, is of course mountains out there in DeKalb, Illinois. Who would have thought? That certainly wouldn't have been me. But then we get some new non-mountains, the flat plains of Sacramento, California, joining the flat plains of the Midwest in order to still be a part of this conference. And technically speaking, because Sacramento is in the northern part of the country, it's still technically, same geography of the country. All the schools still remain in the north. Is just we're just stretching it out a little bit, like we're stretching the belt after a big meal at Golden Corral.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the definition of college football nowadays? Let's just make our conferences as wide as possible and, hypothetically as high as possible, going north to south. So, let's just make our conferences, as physically big as possible, covering as much land as possible.
Yeah, it's just the equivalent of, can we get our conferences to be the like the people that appear on the My 600-Pound Life. That's really how we're doing things from the the stretching of the geography standpoint. But with that being said, now that we do have a schedule to look at, I'm very interested to hear what your thoughts are, because I haven't seen this before. Not one, but two programs in this conference has multiple FCS teams on its schedule. I know UMass got a lot of attention for having two teams on its schedule, but Buffalo quietly, just like sneaking in there, that second team. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before.
No, neither have I. And I know you pointed it out with UMass, but Buffalo was going to be one of the teams I pointed out, not as a winner or loser, just solely because they are one of the teams that does have two FCS opponents on their schedule between Albany and Robert Morris. So, I mean, it's definitely interesting, makes it for a lighter schedule hypothetically, but those aren't going to be pushover games. I would assume. I don't know Albany and Robert Morris off the top of my head, but FCS teams sometimes can, punch up their weight class. So definitely interesting.
Yeah, and we've seen this particularly with some of the basement dwellers at the FBS level. I know last year in particular, I know this is not a MAC team by any means, but Mid-Tennessee State, for example, they played Austin Peay during non-conference play. And not only did Austin Peay go on the road and beat that Blue Raiders football team, they won by 3 touchdowns. So just because they have that FCS patch on the side of their jersey, that doesn't mean by any means that we are going to see a guaranteed win. That's certainly not something that's always going to happen. But I'm very curious now that you're thinking about those winners and losers, as we'll go to our big board of destiny, so that you guys clearly know what we're doing in terms of biggest winner and biggest loser. You kind of talked about it already, but I'm very curious. It's not a Buffalo. It's not a UMass. Who does stand out as a team that has really benefit from this particular schedule draw to you, Reed?
It surprisingly is the newcomer to the conference. I'm going with Sacramento State as my biggest winner. Now, they jump out right out of the gates against Eastern Michigan in the conference game away from home, which isn't the easiest games to open your FBS status, but they do have an FCS opponent right after that. And then I feel like they're out of conference games, while on paper they might stack up, relatively well against. I feel like they're very competitive and good. I would say like level setters for what the Sacramento State team is going to be in 2026. At Fresno State is going to be competing in the Pac-12. We'll see how they fare. North Dakota State also making the jump. I'm excited to get the new FBS Bowl. I forget the name that you titled the bowl game, Jake, but Sacramento State and North Dakota State battling it out as the newcomers to the FBS. And then personally, they're the biggest winners to me because they avoid potentially the top 2 teams in the conference, Western Michigan and Miami of Ohio. That was a big factor to me. And then interesting, they finished the season at Hawaii, which I think could be a fascinating game to round out their schedule. But mainly, they're the biggest winners to me because they avoid potentially the top 2 teams in the conference in Western Michigan and Miami of Ohio. So that's why I have Sac State as my biggest winner.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned it in terms of being able to avoid certain teams, and we did end up declaring that the Sacramento State and North Dakota State game, when I was yearning for it before it was even announced, we did call it the FBS Debut Bowl, something that we may or may not try to trademark if it's something
Yes.
that both programs want to use. Please fly us out. Would love to catch a game out there in Northern California. I was with you, Reed. Actually, I had Sacramento State as the biggest winner as well. You kind of touched on it in terms of being able to avoid a Toledo, being able to avoid a Miami, as well as a Western Michigan. Some of the top teams in this conference. But even looking at the middle and the bottom portions of this conference and comparing it to its schedule, I looked at Sacramento State's conference schedule. They only have 3 conference games versus teams that went to a bowl game last year. And 2 of those teams are going to be breaking in new coaching staffs. Toledo is going to be breaking in Mike Jacobs, who's in his first year after a successful tenure at Mercer. And then not only that, but also the Ohio Bobcats too. Third coach in 3 years are going to be breaking in a brand new coaching staff there as well for the Ohio Bobcats. And both of those teams that I just mentioned, they're also going to be coming to Sacramento. So those are 2 teams that are going to have to make a cross-country road trip to come and play you. And, playing on the road is one thing, but then we've historically have seen teams that travel across the country to play a game usually doesn't end up boding too well. They also get multiple bye weeks, which I think is a nice benefit of having the week 0 as well. So they don't never have to play more than 6 games at a time before they get into a bye. And then, of course, to end the season, that Hawaii trip that I think is going to be a fun game to watch and be fascinated about. They get 2 weeks to prepare for it because they have a bye beforehand before they travel to go play that Hawaii football team. So I was with you, Reed. I loved what I saw from Sacramento State's schedule, and it puts them in a unique position to where, not saying that they'll be playing in Detroit. That would be crazy if we have a California team playing in Detroit for the MAC title game, but they can be competitive in a lot of football games, even if they don't end up going bowling or being bowl eligible in year number 1.
Yeah, this schedule definitely favors them in that regard. We still don't know pretty much what this Sacramento State roster is going to look like. I mean, we know the names. It's just we don't know how they're going to perform on the field in that sense. So the schedule is definitely favorable, and especially in their first season at the FBS level and in the MAC. But I mean, you made the point exactly. Pretty much their toughest tests are against the better teams in the conference that are bringing in new head coaches. So that definitely plays to their favor. On the other side, though, my biggest loser has been a mainstay in the conference for a hot minute now. It's the Bowling Green Falcons. Now, Bowling Green has I'm just going to straight up say it, they have a gauntlet. They have an absolute gauntlet of a schedule. First of all, they play 9 straight games to start their season. Their bye doesn't come until, what is that, week 10, week 11, November 3rd. Their bye week isn't until November, the first week of November. They open up the season at home against Tarleton State, who has been an FCS powerhouse over the last few seasons. Then you go on the road to just a small little stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska to face the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And then you go on the road once again to Ames, Iowa to take on the Cyclones of Iowa State. Now again, they are bringing in a new head coach as well, new regime, completely whole different roster, but it's still punching up to a Power 4 level against Iowa State on the road. Then you come back home and you have to play a potential G5 candidate for the playoff in South Florida, who, in my opinion, is in that top 3 to 4 range for the G5 in the playoff. So that's not a pushover game. Your first conference game on the road at one of the top 3 teams in the conference, Miami of Ohio, that is not going to be an easy test. Sacramento State, as we preface, could be a puncher's shot. They get them at home, though, so we'll see how that goes. Ball State, Buffalo, and then you go on the road to Western Michigan, who we both agreed was the top team in this conference, and then you finally get your bye week. So this schedule for Bowling Green is, I don't know what Bowling Green did to the MAC offices, but apparently they hate Bowling Green. I think they just got mad. They got mad at Pudge the Cat, but those first 5 games that I prefaced, Tarleton State, Nebraska, Iowa State, South Florida, and Miami of Ohio are, if they can make it out 2 and 3 in those games, I'd call that a success.
Yeah, and that Tarleton State football team, that might be perceived as the easiest game that Bowling Green has in that first like month and a half. But Tarleton State, I mean, they were in the FCS playoffs last year, and they went to the Army Academy and took down the Army. I mean, we're talking about our military members going down to the Texans last fall.
They took down a whole branch of the military.
I know.
That's unbelievable.
I know that would be a national emergency, you know, but you know that's what Tarleton State did, and so this is a Texas team that is, you know, very capable of pulling that kind of upset off. I ended up going in a different direction though than you did, Reed. So I went with Kent State as my biggest loser personally. So Kent State, similar situation as Bowling Green, where I don't know who they pissed off. I don't know what cereal box that they pissed in while the schedule is being formulated. But this is also a team where they have to play 9 games in a row before they get their bye.
Yep,
9 games. Yep. I mean, just diabolical, haphazard work being done to Kent State. And so that depth is going to be tested, because you already know by the time that game 7, 8, and 9 roll around, you're talking about having to really have your depth tested. That's a lot of wear and tear on the body, right? But it goes a little bit deeper than that, not just because of the fact that the bye situation, let's be honest, Kent State got a little bit screwed there. They have a really tough non-conference schedule at South Carolina to open things up. Doesn't get talked about enough. South Carolina, an extremely tough place to play at. It hasn't been highlighted as much because South Carolina has been inconsistent. That's an incredibly tough environment to open things up in the beginning of the year. At Ohio State, a team that made the college football playoff last year, they made it to the college football playoff, and they made it all the way to the quarterfinals. Oh, and how about this? One of your easier non-conference games that you have that's still an FBS opponent, that South Florida team. Yeah, that's on Kent State's schedule too. Not going to talk about how great South Florida is because you mentioned it, but USF, they got to go to USF. Okay. Oh, and then how about conference play at Western Michigan? You got Miami at home as well, which the more that I think about this Miami team, the more that I like them, to be honest with you. We might be making some changes to my personal MAC rankings the more I sit back and think about Miami. But yeah, for me, it's by far the most difficult schedule in this conference. And it's going to be challenging for them to kind of replicate what they did last year when they were kind of flirting with bowl eligibility in the month of November. Yeah,
they were. If I had to pick like a 1A, 1B type situation with Bowling Green and Kent State, they were definitely right there for me. I mean, you preface it, you have to play 9 straight games right out of the gate. Your bye week isn't until the first week of November. That back-to-back road stretch right in the middle of the season, right in the middle of October at Western Michigan and at South Florida is going to define their season. If they can go potentially 1-1, maybe in that stretch, you know, based on the first 5 games that they have, you know, if they could salvage a 5-7, 500 schedule, you know, record with this schedule, that would be a win. Yeah, that would be a win for me with Kent State for sure. So, I mean, those are back-to-back games in the middle of October that are potential G5 playoff candidates, both of them. So, yeah, Kent State's definitely gonna have to be punching above their weight class for sure.
Yeah, and it's going to test. We saw Mark Carney did an incredible job with this Kent State football program last year, and we might need to see a really good job yet again if they want to have that same record in last year. And one more thing that I wanted to note about them, because I forgot to touch up on it, that last game that they have before they end up going to their bye week in particular, they have to go on the road to play Sacramento State. So that's a cross-country road trip. Again, we don't know how good Sacramento State that is going to be, but we're talking about making a cross-country road trip to play a football game. That's a tough endeavor for any program, not just, you know, these teams that are in the MAC. Any program, even your Ohio States of the world, would have a difficult time making that field trip and then come away with a victory. So that's their 9th game that they're going to play is, you're going to travel all the way to California.
Have fun.
Like, good luck, boys.
Yep.
Gonna be watching
Enjoy.
from all the way over here. But hey, definitely am curious to hear what you guys' thoughts in the comment section down below or in the live chat. If you're listening to the show live, who your biggest winners and losers are from the max schedule release that happened last week. Definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts. But while the max schedule release has been a wonderful appetizer, I always love me some good mac and cheese. I'm ready for some filet mignon. I don't know if you're a filet mignon type of guy, but I'm a huge steak guy.
For sure.
And I'm ready to get into that steak. The ACC, man. What an interesting conference that we have on our hands this year, don't we?
I'm just going to preface it. This conference is pretty defined to me. There's a bottom tier, a middle tier, which makes up the big chunk of the conference, and then probably 3-4 contenders in my eyes. It was pretty cut and dry for me. I'm not going to lie.
So it was actually really fascinating for me when I was putting together my spring rankings, which is being displayed over on Twitter, and it's we're gonna slowly roll that out on YouTube as well. My personal rankings, which is different from the group consensus that we've been doing. I feel that there is a limited number of teams that can realistically win this conference in 2026, but at the same time, looking at this conference from a more holistic standpoint. I saw 12 to 13 teams, that there is a world that exists where that team could be playing in Charlotte for the conference championship game at the end of the year. And I wanted to throw this out there just from what my model is telling me. So if the second best team that's ultimately in my rankings played the 13th best team in this conference on a neutral side field, the second best team would only be a touchdown favorite over team number 13, which is absolutely insane to think about.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing.
So I feel like, is this league probably going to be a one big league? Yeah, I would be shocked if multiple teams from the ACC made the college football playoff this year. But you want to talk about a chaos conference? If there's going to be a chaos conference in the power ranks, I think the ACC has to be that chaos conference, right?
We've already seen it. We've already seen it for the past few years. I'm just going to use last year as an example. We had a 5-loss conference champion in Duke completely mess up the playoff and allowed 2 G5 teams to get in the playoff. If that's not bad enough, I don't even know how many teams were a part of the tiebreaker. It was like the top 6 or 7 teams in the conference, that were a part of the tiebreaker in the end. And a 5-loss team made your conference championship game. How does that even happen?
Not only did they make their conference championship game, but they ultimately won their conference championship too, and it led to some rules being changed in terms of how are the bids for the college football playoff are going to be determined. Just think about Virginia had a good year in its own right, 10-2, 10-win season. That is an incredible year, regardless of where you are. But at the same time, you have to think of the what if game. Like, what if Virginia won that game against Duke in Charlotte? We might still see the exact same rule set compared to what we have now currently in terms of how they changed some things up as a result of some chaos that happened late in November.
That's not even the biggest what if in my mind. There are 2 games that stand out at the back end of the ACC schedule last year. What if Georgia Tech beats Pitt? Pitt walks into Bobby Dodd and handles them. I'm not going to say comfortably, but handles them. And then SMU dropping the ball against Cal on the road, at Berkeley. So those are you prefaced it perfectly, Jake. There's probably a good 12 or 13 teams that in some world they make it to Charlotte. And one of those teams has never even made it to Charlotte and was the best team in that conference last year and ended up playing for a national championship game. So I absolutely have no idea with the ACC aside from the top 4 teams that I'm going to break down later in the show. But this is the wildest conference top to bottom. This is wilder than the Big 12. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, and I think the Big 12 at this time feels a little bit more solidified. I think the ACC is what I think people believe the Big 12 has been the last couple of years. And even with my 14th ranked team that we're going to unveil pretty soon here, they would be a 7.5 point underdog, according to my model, to the second best team. So I didn't mention them specifically, but even this 14th team that I'm going to list, there even is also somehow a possibility for them to get the Charlotte, although that's a little bit more on the long side of things. Yeah. So that being said, if you want to put this in like a random number generator for most of this list, I really would not blame you.
Probably couldn't argue with it. Yeah, totally.
Well, if you want to throw it into Chat GPT's Grok, you want to let your pod decide. That's fine by me. So let's go ahead and throw up the graphic real quick, and this is what we're going to be working off of for a lot of what we're doing here. So this is what we got going on here. We got our 1 through 17 list, just an incredible monstrosity. And Reed, we're going to fill this out tonight. You excited, my man?
Yes, as long as we don't go nearly 2.5 hours like we did with the Big Ten. But then again, the Big Ten had 18 teams, so one less team to talk about.
Yeah, and we also have the the benefit of hopefully we don't rage bait each other up like this time around, because then we had a fair amount of rage baiting like the last time go around. Made for great content. I can't complain about that, but we'll see what happens here. So I'm a gentleman. You're always a guest on my show here, man. So with that being said, I'll let you kick things off in terms of who is sitting at the very bottom of the ACC conference as we embrawl ourselves in spring ball. Reed, who's that team for you?
Yeah, and I feel like this might be a consensus pick between the two of us. I have Boston College at number 17. Now, Bill O'Brien, I've said it about a handful of coaches before. I'm surprised he's still there, given all that he has not accomplished at Boston College. Great coordinator in the NFL. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to deny that. But he's not lived up to the standard of what Boston College has been in the past. I have him at 17 solely because they made some okay additions in the transfer portal this past cycle, but nothing too outstanding to me that really thinks they're going to make that big of a jump from the bottom of the pack as they were last season. Mason McKenzie comes in at quarterback from Saginaw Valley State. How about that? Mason McKenzie comes in. They lose Dylan Lonergan through the portal, so he's no longer there at quarterback. Mason McKenzie, over 2,000 yards, 14 touchdowns and no interceptions. So I will give him credit for that. Evan Dickens at running back, over a 1,300-yard rusher last season with Liberty, is inserted into the backfield for this Boston College offense. And Reed Swanson, great name, near 1,000-yard receiver for Colgate last season at the FCS level with 8 touchdowns as well. Offensive line-wise, they return a pretty good chunk of FCS, notably, talent is what's standing out to me. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of this tackle. Jean Jameau from Tennessee State is inserted. He was graded a pretty good offensive tackle alongside Trayvon Humphrey from North Carolina Central. They were both rated pretty solid tackles for the FCS level. So it's going to be a patchwork offensive line, a lot of newcomers to the unit. Defensively is where I have my biggest questions. A main standout for me on the defensive side that coming into this Boston College team, Chris Jones, coming in from Georgia. Didn't get a ton of playing time for the Dogs last season, but as I've said before, I value, players coming down from other, bigger name P4 schools. So Chris Jones, inserted at defensive end from Georgia, is the player I'm going to keep an eye out for on the defensive line unit for Boston College. And again, as I preface, I just feel like the additions that they made aren't going to be enough to really jumpstart them to really be competitive in the ACC. I think they're solid additions for what they were, but then again, they all were mainly from the FCS level, their best additions. So is that really going to translate, especially to a conference like the ACC? I don't really think so. So Bill O'Brien, if he's not on the hot seat already, he won't be Boston College's coach by the end of next season. So I will put them at number 17.
Yeah, and I know you really touched up on Mason McKenzie in particular, and you're essentially hoping that he becomes the next Trinidad Chambliss. Someone that
Mhm.
like played really well at the Division II ranks. Although unlike Trinidad Chambliss, doesn't have a Division II national championship to his name. Now comes up to Boston College. If he is Trinidad Chambliss, somehow, then they'll end up decently higher on this list. I don't know how much higher. I don't know how much of a difference one person can make.
Mhm.
I also had Boston College at the bottom. I'm not going to lie to you. So you're right, Reed. Definitely there is a consensus there. Not only trying to replace the guys that you talked about, but they also had 4 players go off to the NFL. So that's also a decent amount of NFL talent that you have to get rid of. Omar Forden is now a Miami Hurricane. That was one of your best DBs that was going to be back from this team, but because of the transfer portal, that is no longer going to be the case. And how about Turbo Richard? Possible all name honorable mention
Yes.
in this conference. Well, he's not even in this conference anymore. He's now playing with Indiana, part of that Indiana Hoosiers backfield, and taking handoffs from that coaching staff. And Josh Hoover in
Yes.
particular. So I'm right there with you. I had them at the very bottom. They were my number 17 team. And it's going to be a tough hill to climb for Bill O'Brien in his third year. If he surpasses expectations, that's great. But at the same time, if it's as bad as what we think it's going to be, we could be seeing a brand new head coach up there in Boston. And I'm not talking about the Patriots either.
And a name we both didn't really mention, their best receiver from last year, Reed Harris, also is not on this team anymore. He's now at Arizona State. Correct me if I'm
Yep.
wrong. Yeah. So he's also not on this team anymore. So it's definitely an uphill climb for Bill O'Brien. Again, we're both not high on them at all. I'm not trying to speak for you, but I would be surprised if he's still the head coach there next season.
Yeah. Yeah, although I will say this though, and I'm curious what you think the gap is between this team and Boston College. I had Stanford coming in right afterwards,
Mhm.
as my 16th best team. Now I will say this about the Stanford Cardinal. I think that overall this football team is going to be better than what it was last season. I will say that. I like the transfers that they brought in, particularly from the FCS level. Aiden Killstrom is an interior offensive lineman from Harvard. Very smart dude. Not everybody's going to Harvard and playing football. That's someone that is going to potentially be a starter on the Stanford offensive line. So
For
that's
sure.
someone that I'm very high on from an offensive line perspective. They also got Leroy Bryant. That was probably the biggest name here. Transfers from Washington, played extensively for the Huskies, had multiple interceptions last year, so a little bit of a ball hawk there. They also bring in Nico Brown from Yale, who had over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. And then Davian Godley transfers in from Weber State. He had some good production as well at the FCS level. Plus, they do return Matt Rose, who is a second-team all-conference linebacker. He is back with the Stanford Cardinal going into this year. I just have a lot of questions about Tavita Pritchard, the brand new head coach for the Stanford Cardinal. Haven't really seen him be a head coach at the FBS level. He was previously the quarterbacks coach in the NFL with the Washington Commanders. I know Washington, the Commanders football team, they didn't have the best of seasons. Quarterback wasn't the reason why their season was not considered a success, but at the same time, I'm very curious to see how it looks with him as the head coach, and he's going to be much less experienced compared to some of his peers in his conference.
He's probably going to be the least experienced of any other coach in this conference. And not even just talking about Tavita Pritchard as the new head coach. There's a lot of turnover on this roster. I mean, we haven't even talked about the quarterback position yet. Davis Warren comes in from Michigan. I'm projecting him as the starter, but his time in Michigan was pretty up and down. So who knows how he's going to be inserted in this Tavita Pritchard offense. I do like that they retain Micah Ford in the backfield, over 600 yards, 4 touchdowns. I do like that they retain their starting running back. Caden High coming in from South Carolina State last year. over 400 yards in his first season in this offense. Good to have some continuity at the receiver position. Also, Nico Brown inserted in this receiver room from Yale, over 1,000 yards, so an 11 touchdowns. So I think that is a good addition. Their offensive line, while they do retain a handful of starters from last season, I mean, they weren't the best offensive line in the ACC last year. I don't think they're really going to take a step up if it's all pretty much the same names and faces as last season. They retained 3 starters from last season. So Stanford, I have just above Boston College, just solely because I think some of their position players and that continuity on the offensive line is going to benefit them in the long run. But Nico Brown is probably the standout name I'm going to look for on the Stanford offense, at least. 1,000-yard receiver, you can't overlook that, even if it was with Yale in the Ivy League. They also bring in a handful of 4-star recruits that I'm going to keep an eye out on. Zion Robinson was a 4-star receiver in this past recruiting class, and Laziah Jackson, 4-star safety on the defensive back end. So they retain a handful of defensive linemen as well. They got some game time last season. So this Stanford team, I think, is going to be more competitive just solely because in key positions they do have continuity, namely in the trenches, but not enough to be competing for the upper to mid tier of the conference. So I'm gonna also put them at 16.
All right, so agreed. You're scaring me a little bit. Like exactly the same so far. Did you read my notes or something? That's that's crazy to me. But yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you're saying. It's going to be a little bit uphill climb. But I am glad, even though I do have questions about Tabitha Pritchard, is that they do at least have their permanent head coach. Where last year was a transition year, and now it seems like Andrew Luck, who has been entrusted with the overall running of this program. He has his guy, and the foundation can start to be built so that Stanford can hopefully not find itself in the 16s like it moving forward.
For sure.
All right, man. So with that being said, right now, great lines of think alike, but I'm curious to see if that is still going to continue.
Yeah.
Your number 15 Reed. I'm curious to see if we have the same team here too, or does the streak end?
I hope this doesn't come as a shock, and it's solely because of the head coach of this program. I'm not super high on him. It's going to be Syracuse at 15 for me. The Syracuse Orange, I know Fran Brown a couple years ago won 9 games, in his first season, punched above his weight class. No one expected Syracuse to be that competitive in Fran Brown's first year. But last year, right after Steve Angeli went down against Clemson, their season went up in flames. Now, I will give them the benefit of the doubt. They did was their starting quarterback. A lot can, downward spiral after that happens. But so Steve Angeli is back, hopefully fully healthy for a full season for Syracuse. So they do have the upside of that. When they were on the field with him, they were one of the best offenses in the country in the first 4-5 weeks of the season when he was healthy. So I will give them the benefit of the doubt. If they can replicate that, they're easily up to the middle of the pack for me in this conference. But we don't know how that's going to be. They bring in Amari Odom, also a quarterback from Kennesaw State, conference champion Amari Odom at Kennesaw State. Over 2,500 yards, 19 touchdowns. He wasn't even the main starter for Kennesaw State going into the season last year. He came off the bench and then was inserted as the starter in the middle of the season and was still able to put up that much production and lead Kennesaw State to a conference championship. So that's interesting. Malachi Nelson, world-renowned traveler at this point. He is also on the Syracuse roster at quarterback. So that's one of the biggest position groups I'm looking out for with the Syracuse team. I know Steve Angeli is probably going to be the starter, but Amari Odom is a very capable backup if Steve Angeli were to get hurt again. I would be very confident in Amari Odom leading this offense if Angeli were to go down again, but hoping he does not. Ahmad Miller gets inserted in this offense from Jacksonville State. Over 1,000-yard rusher, 5 touchdowns, like that insertion into the backfield. Cole Weaver is a receiver coming in from Miami of Ohio, over 600 yards with the touchdown last year. Probably going to be one of the main targets for whoever's the starting quarterback, I assume Steve Angeli. 4-star high school prospects, Calvin Russell and Amari Gouge, 2 incoming freshmen that are pretty high on the Syracuse receiving, depth chart. I would expect them to be early contributors as well as Matt Outen coming over from Penn State after the overturning coaching there. So their offensive line, while they retain 2 starters, is going to be once again pretty much a patchwork job as the other teams that we've talked about so far. The biggest question mark for me is, can Angeli replicate his production from early last season? If he does, Syracuse can punch above their weight and go into the middle of the pack here in the ACC. But I think I'm just not high on Fran Brown anymore. I think he's losing this Syracuse team, and if they're not back to at least 500 this season, I could see him on the hot seat going into next year.
Yeah, and that's completely fair, because I remember in the month of September, this Syracuse team was playing arguably its best ball, particularly when they were, they went to town on Clemson, which I know that Clemson hasn't had its best days over the last few years, but for them to go into Death Valley and being able to provide that BDA experience to a Dabo Swinney coach Clemson football team, that was a shock to the system. But then seeing Steve Angeli go down and then this team fell apart, that certainly is a concern, because if one person has that kind of effect on your football team to where you don't win, they didn't win a single game after that Clemson beatdown, which is crazier to me. And it's probably one of the more interesting box scores that we're going to look back on in a few years from now and ask ourselves, man, how did Syracuse beat Clemson that day and do what they did, right? So that does concern me. Now, like you mentioned, the quarterback position, the backups at the quarterback position should be better. Amari Odom has starting experience at Kennesaw State, and then you also have Malachi Nelson in a break glass situation, but he didn't look very good at UTEP. So that was a big reason why I had them at number 15 as well, to be honest with you. I swear I did not copy your notes, man. This is not intentional. A couple of people that I do want to touch on. I think their special teams is going to be pretty good. They bring Jack Stonehouse, who actually was a first-team all-conference punter for the Syracuse Orange last year. So the special teams should be pretty good. And whoever does play quarterback for Syracuse, I really like the Calvin Russell addition as well. 5-star recruit at 247 Sports. He's going to – I don't say this very often because most – high school seniors that enter in a situation where they're playing college football for the first time, most of those cats are not ready to play right away. But Calvin Russell is the exception. You're going to see him on the field, and he might be starting for the Syracuse football team day one. He is that good. So I'm excited to see him play. Defensive line, the defensive trenches could be steadily good, particularly in interior. Tumis Adelaide, transfers from UNLV. He has 6 sacks from the interior. And then Jartavius Fournier of Georgia State, he has 6 TFLs last year as well. So I think this team is overall better, but the trust is not high, just given the bad taste in my mouth that I had where this team essentially finished on an 8-game losing streak. And that was essentially off of one player. So you saw a lot of giving up in the second half of the season. How much of that did Fran Brown eliminate from the locker room? That's going to be the $1 million question, which is why I have them at number 15 right now. But there's still, plenty of time to figure that out. We still have 5 to 6 months until the season starts.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm curious to see, though, who you have at 14, Jake, because at this point, we're just going to have the same exact teams in the same exact spots. So curious to see who you have at 14, but I feel like I have a good idea.
All right, so I'm sure this is not going to be a big surprise. I swear, we did not get together before the show started. We got together a whole 10 minutes before the show started.
We don't even we don't even text about it. We don't even text about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea what he does during the day. I promise you. But number 14 is North Carolina. At this case, I do have the Tar Heels coming in here, led by Bill Belichick. A lot of hype from Bill Belichick. I still remember where I was. I was in the hospital witnessing my son being born. And then the day after was when they announced that Bill Belichick has been hired as the head coach from North Carolina. So I'll always have that core moment for me, knowing where I was when Bill Belichick returned back to coaching, right? And they do have some interesting pieces that they have. Malkurt Abdul-Jalade is an edge rusher for North Carolina. Yep. He's a second-team all-conference guy. He is back with the Tar Heels football team this upcoming season. And then they did add some pieces. I don't know how this guy went as long as he did in the transfer portal and nobody picked him up. But Taron Dickens, if
Yeah.
you want like someone that's most likely going to be a Trinidad Chambliss, where someone transfers from the FCS or Division II, Division III level, whatever, and comes up to the FBS level and makes an impact and is a star player, I think Taron Dickens is most likely going to be that guy. 3,500 yards, 38 touchdowns. He only threw 2 interceptions, which is why I was shocked that he didn't get picked up by somebody sooner. So I don't know if he's an asshole or I don't know what was happening, but like Taron Dickens is special. He is absolutely special, and the Catamounts I know are going to miss him. They do add a couple of other pieces. They add Mason Humphreys from Lehigh. They also add Donovan Holate as well as Peyton Seelman, who are teammates from Richmond who play on the defensive side of the ball. Mason Humphrey is actually a wide receiver from Lehigh with 650 yards of production. I am still worried about what that linebacking core is going to look like. They do lose both Mekhi Gabayer from Florida State as well as Kamari House. Gabayer going to Florida State and Kamari House going to Arkansas. And it's also just $1 million question of, is Bill Belichick capable of coaching at the college level? Because we know how incredible he is as an NFL head coach. Should be in the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame. No discussion there. But college football and NFL football, it's the same game, but how you run your organization is very different. And I don't know if Bill Belichick is going to be able to figure that out alongside with some of the distractions that he has outside of football as well. So until I'm proven wrong, because I admire and I hope I'm proven wrong, because I do have an admiration for Bill Belichick as a head coach for what he's done for the game. Right now, as a college coach, can't be very high on him right now.
Yeah, can't be high on him as a head coach. Also can't necessarily be high on their offensive coordinator either. Bobby Petrino, longtime Arkansas head coach, now taking over as the offensive coordinator for this North Carolina team. Potentially the oldest head coach offensive coordinator combo in all of college football. If I'm not mistaken, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I think they are the oldest combo. No starters returning on the offensive line, so that's a massive question mark for this North Carolina offense. Taron Dickens, I mean, I'm not going to beat a dead horse while it's down, Jake. You pretty much hit every nail on the head with him. If we're going to put anyone up to the status of being a Trinidad Chambliss going into 2026, he fits the mold perfectly. He's 5'11", 180, 3,500 yards, 30 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Again, as you said it, I don't know how he went that long in the portal. He was one of the last portal additions that was most notable. So to fall in North Carolina and in Bill Belichick's hands, who some would say is a quarterback whisperer, I mean, good for him. Good for Taron Dickens. Good for this North Carolina offense. Jordan Shipp returns on the outside, over nearly 700 yards receiving last year with 6 touchdowns. So that's good to have continuity there. Mason Humphrey was another name that I wrote down as well. Again, that offensive line is the biggest question mark for me. They returned no starters from last season. And how's that gonna fit into a Bobby Petrino offense? I mean, he got a stint there with Arkansas at the back end last season. So huge question marks for me there. Yeah, I don't know. I still don't feel great about North Carolina under Belichick's leadership. The Fighting Jordan Hudsons, if you will. This North Carolina team, it's a ton of portal turnover once again. And I mean, there's another prime example in this conference that loves a portal turnover that we'll get to later. But I can't see it with North Carolina right now. I just can't. But then again, we'll put in the hype video later, and Taron Dickens, will prove us all wrong and be a potential Heisman contender. So they are also at 14 for me. Jake, stop trying to screen share with me and look at my notes, dude. This is getting ridiculous. I can probably almost guarantee you though, our number 13 teams will be different. I can probably guarantee you that.
Be different. There's no shot that 5 teams in a row.
We
have consensus on. I'm not gonna do that say your team on free type deal that, 'cause that's corny. But I'm sure from here on out we're gonna see a little bit more variety, and it's gonna have to be some more interesting conversations.
Yes. for sure. Do you want to go or you want me to?
Yeah, I can get a rolling here with the my 13th team.
Right.
And I was actually surprised by how low I ended up landing on this team. I had Wake Forest here at number 13.
Whoa. Okay.
It was a really good season for Wake Forest last year. I will acknowledge that. I think Jake Dicker did a very good job, particularly how they finished the year last year. But I do also want to acknowledge that this was also a team that, in terms of the luck perspective, they did have some balls bounced their way. Okay, so this is me more so projecting a little bit of a return to the mean here, given that Wake Forest might have been one of the luckier teams in the conference last year. And on top of that, you're talking about you got a good amount of talent, particularly on both lines of scrimmage, that you're going to have to replace. Multiple offensive linemen leaving your program in Falele Falmore. He's now going to be going to the NFL draft, and we wish him the best of luck in his pro career aspirations. They also lose Malvin Sinai, your other offensive tackle. He transfers to Texas and is likely going to be starting for the Texas Longhorns next year. So losing two high-level offensive linemen is going to be a little bit of a red flag there. Mateem Aberoba.
You got it. You got it.
Pronunciation there.
Yeah.
He is a defensive lineman that had an incredible 2025. He transfers to Texas Tech and likely is going to be starting on Texas Tech's defensive line. So that's another really big name in the trenches that you're going to have to replace. And arguably the best player on your team is also NFL bound and Damon Claiborne, the running back for Wake Forest, which I talked about in my preseason preview last July when looking at the ACC. Hey, this is the name to watch out for. He's a certified bad man. And I was right, NFL caliber player. But he's also gone as well. And the same goes for Chris Barnes, who's transferring to Oklahoma State. Could be starting for the Cowboys, even under the North Texas clone team that is out there in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So that's a lot that they're going to have to replace. Now, the cupboard isn't completely empty. I think the secondary is going to be really good this year. Nick Anderson comes back, first-team all-conference player in the ACC, as well as Karen Prunty, who's a third-team all-conference corner. And they did also add Gio Lopez, who's looking to recapture his magic from his South Alabama days, plus Sawyer Saddle, running back from North Dakota, who had nearly 900 yards last year, plus London Davis Jr., who transfers from UTEP. And Kenny Odom gets a lot of attention from that UTEP team last year, but London Davis quietly had a really good year as well, too. And how about Vincent Ferenzi, Dayton safety, Pioneer League love, 3 interceptions last year. So there's pieces in place, but with the amount of either NFL level talent or high level players that they're going to have to replace, plus expecting a regression to the mean from a luck perspective in terms of Wake Forest did have some balls bounced their way last year, and I'm expecting to see a regression from that aspect. That's why I had Wake Forest at 13.
Yeah, I'm a little higher on Wake Forest going into Jake Dicker's second year. Now, I will preface this. I do have inside sources with the Wake Forest program. I do know one of their staffers there. So I have been getting intel from him, but this is not affecting my ranking that much just because I know someone within the program. Wake Forest is going to be my number 10 team. I think they're not due for that much regression as much as you're thinking, in my opinion. I think they're going to be right in the middle of the pack in the ACC. I'm not projecting they're going to win 9 games again, but I could see them going bowling again. Definitely have them in that conversation for sure. Gio Lopez from that inside source has been looking pretty solid throughout camp so far, but then again, it is spring ball. It's really early days here, but I'm high on Gio Lopez. I think he can recapture that South Alabama magic that you were prefacing, Jake. Still had over 1,700 yards and 10 touchdowns last year at North Carolina when what was a very down year in that Tar Heels program. Sawyer Sidor, as you also prefaced from North Dakota State, near 900-yard rusher. You can't ignore that production inserted into the backfield. This receiver group, I'm really looking out for. Juan Davis was a name that I also had circled. So I'm not gonna talk too much about that. Nye Carr coming in from Miami was a former highly touted prospect. He gets inserted into this wide receiver room as well. I think he could make an impact for this Demon Deacons offense. Tolu Olajide at tackle from New Hampshire is going to be the standout on the offensive line for me. They actually get a handful of pretty solid offensive linemen out of the portal. Ethan Callaway from LSU, Ryan Berger at guard from Oregon State, John O'Hegan, I think I'm pronouncing that right. He played center for Bucknell last season. Was a pretty solid option for them at the FCS level, over 770 snaps, graded pretty highly in the run and pass blocking categories. So I'm looking out for him on the offensive line as well. Langston Hardy is the mainstay on the defensive line. He has to have another big year for this Demon Deacons roster. So I think they're good for a middle of the pack finish here. I think Wake Forest, Jake Dicker has him easily going in the right direction. 9-4 in his first season was an unbelievable feat. So I'm projecting them around a bowl eligibility team, six or seven wins for Wake Forest coming up in 2026, and they're going to be my number 10 team.
Yeah, and to be clear, even though I do have Wake Forest as my 13th best team, I still think that this is a team that's going to be playing in bowl season. I still think that they're going to be around that 6 and 7 win range, like you mentioned, Reed, which kind of goes to show the depth of this conference, even though they don't have any elite teams besides the one that we're probably going to both pick to win this conference. But yeah, I could see some regression to the mean, which is why I couldn't go any higher from 13. But we actually had disagreement for one region. Imagine that. It turns out that we aren't linked to the hip, right? So I'm very curious, since you didn't have Wake Forest, you were a little bit higher on them than I was. Who did end up being your 13th ranked team, though?
Now, Jake, you know me pretty well, right? I would say you know me pretty well.
I would say that I at least have heard of your name for a while.
Well, you also know what part of the country I reside in. You know who I support as a college football fan, who my team is. And you probably know where I'm prefacing this. I have the Pittsburgh Panthers at number 13. Now, let me preface this because you said this earlier in the show, and I want to restate this before I break down Pitt. They are one of the 13 teams that we preface that there is some scenario realistically that they could be competitive and potentially playing back in Charlotte once again. I want to preface that they definitely do have the upside on this roster to be able to do that. But I think this is the team for me, similar to you viewing Wake Forest regression of the mean. I think Pitt is my regression of the mean team from last season. Coming on the fringe of playing in that ACC championship game, the two games that stand out at the back end of that schedule, Notre Dame and Miami, I can't forget those. They looked abysmal in both of those games. But then inserted in the middle of that, they have the Georgia Tech win, which was a great win on the road at Bobby Dodd. I can't ignore that. Mason Heinschel is back for his sophomore season, over 2,300 yards, 16 touchdowns. He has to reduce those 8 interceptions from last season. The true freshman last year gets inserted in the middle of the season, and he looked phenomenal at times. But I think there has to be regression. I'm going to say a sophomore slump for Mason Heinschel coming in this season. Ja'Carrion Turner is not one who I think has a sophomore slump at running back, over 700 yards in the backfield. He also was a true freshman last season, and he will get the bulk of the carries out of the backfield this season. But don't look just at Turner. Lavelle Wright is inserted in the backfield as well, coming in from Western Kentucky. Nearly 500 yards rushing and 10 touchdowns. So got to look out for him as well. Malik Knight, who was the lead wide receiver at Western Carolina for Dickens, as we said before, for North Carolina, over 770 yards and 7 touchdowns at receiver. I don't care what level of football it's at. That is great. That is great production on the outside. So he is inserted in this Pitt offense. Katarius Hicks is back at receiver as well. The offensive line, while they do return 4 starters, I think this is where we see a little bit of the regression from last season. While they do return 4 starters, some of them didn't really grade out well in their pass pro. That's my biggest question. Can they improve on their pass pro, protect Nation Heinschel, and get the ball out to those weapons that I prefaced? The defensive line returns a handful of starters from last season. So does the linebacking core. DeMarco Ward and Alex Stanford are the two names I have circled. Nearly 100 tackles combined between the two of them, coming in from Memphis and Purdue, respectively. So this Pitt team, I'm going to say it again. They definitely have the upside of being a very competitive team once again. But putting my personal bias aside with them, no, I'm just kidding. Not my personal bias. Pitt is going to be at 13 for me. I just think they see some regression from last season. And I'm not the biggest Pat Narduzzi fan, nor the Pitt fans are the biggest Pat Narduzzi fan. I think their time is kind of running out on him. And surprisingly, for the history and the pedigree that Pitt football has had before, they're also not investing NIL wise how you would expect, a big name brand as Pitt, to really compete with. So I have him at 13. I think this is a make or break year for Pat Narduzzi, and especially with the fan base as well. So I have Pitt at number 13.
Yeah. So Reed, we're gonna have some fun with this one because I'm gonna tell you what, I did not have Pitt at number 13. Obviously, I
probably didn't have him in your bottom half.
My top 10.
Yeah,
I had them as a borderline top 5 team. I ended up having them as my 6th team in the ACC going into spring ball. And I know there's a decent amount of losses on the defensive line and in the linebacking core, as well as losing Desmond Reed. That's going to be tough to replace. But I do think that offensive line is going to be better based on what you said. With 4 offensive line starters coming back, I believe. Plus, they added Kaylin Davis in the transfer portal. That's an interior offensive lineman coming from Akron, who has the potential to start on the offensive line as well. So that's some experience that you're adding in what is quietly one of the more important units that you could have on your football team as well. Another person that I'm excited to watch, that I hope he gets an opportunity on the field, is Kanye Thompson. Transfers from Slippery Rock. He, as a corner, he had 5.5 tackles for loss and 4 forced fumbles. That is just unheard of stuff from a defensive back. So he's clearly a thumper and he loves to hit people. So I'm hoping he gets an opportunity to be on the field. But none of that pales in comparison to Mason Heichel. I am a
sell me
Heichel truther.
Yeah.
He took over that job in the middle of the last year, which is why Eli Holstein left to go play at Virginia, because he couldn't handle the Mason Heichel show. Lit the world on fire over the course of October and November. Yeah, might have been a little reckless at times. He might need to cut on those turnovers, but he plays with bravery. He plays with courage. As some of my friends down the bayou would say, he puts his nuts on his shoulders every time he plays the game of football. And not to mention Pat Narduzzi. Hey, maybe he's not in his prime as a head coach. But this is still someone that is, to me, is one of the best head coaches in the ACC as well. So tremendous amount of respect as well to Pat Narduzzi. It's not very often when Pat Narduzzi is stepping out on the field. He is the second best head coach, particularly in the ACC. So that's why I'm incredibly high. And I'm saying this as someone that's a Cincinnati sports fan. So you got to think like Cincinnati and Pitt, we hate each other to like the umpteenth degree. And we were talking about that before we went live. But I really like this Pitt football team in spite of the losses. I got them at number 6.
Yeah, I mean, I can't be mad at it because, again, if all of their pieces fall in the right places, they could compete to go to Charlotte. I'm not denying that. I'm not going against that at all. I definitely think that's a real possibility. And again, if Mason Heichel doesn't have the regression like I project, they're definitely in that upper, part of the conference. I'm not denying that.
Now, a team that I will say that I'm not as high on, but I still think there's a world where they make it to Charlotte, and you're probably going to be a little surprised when I say this name because I was hyping them up a little bit earlier in the offseason. I had Cal at number 12, to be honest with you. So really like the key additions that they made. I think the weaponry is going to be better with Chase Hendricks and Ian Strong. I think that's going to be a fun combination with Adam Muhammad in the backfield as well to help out JSC in that quarterback position, who had some really good flashes as a true freshman. But then you have to realize that, unfortunately, there is two sides of the ball. So the offense is really good. It's like, have you ever seen the the drawing of the horse picture meme where like one part of the horse looks really beautiful, and then as you continue to progress in drawing the horse, you realize you're running out of space, and then the horse looks a little crappier. Well, so Cal football, the really nice part of the horse is the offense. The defensive side of the ball, new head coach Tosh Rapoy is going to have some work to do. They lose Cade Uvalde in the transfer portal. He goes over to BYU. Not only one of the best defensive players on this team last year, but he was probably one of the best defensive players in this conference last year that was going to return anyway. So to lose him to BYU, that's really rough to see. They also lose TJ Bush, who transfers to Minnesota, who had 5.5 sacks. Luke Farrelly, Cade Uvalde's teammate, he also transfers, and while not as touted as Cade Uvalde, Luke Farrelly had 91 tackles last year for him. So there is a concern in that linebacker field that I don't feel was backfilled well enough. They didn't really bring any linebackers in that have that preferential production that I'm looking for. And then they also, on top of that, they lose their long snapper to Kansas, which doesn't sound like much, but you have to think because that 2 from 13 is so close in my mind, special teams is going to play a huge role in deciding games. So all of that, plus with Tosh Rapoy, who both of us are really high on. We loved him as a defensive coordinator at Oregon.
Yes.
We have to see him also prove it as a head coach. And I think he'll do a good job. I am concerned that he's not going to have enough to work with on the defensive side of the football in order to make not a realistic push. I still think it's realistic for Cal to be in Charlotte, but to have the expectation of being in Charlotte. I still think we're about a year away. Now, this time next year, look out for Cal football. Especially if they keep all those offensive pieces in place. But for right now, I have so many concerns about the defensive side of the football that everything that they did on the offensive side of the ball in the transfer portal, including Dorian Thomas, who I don't think I even mentioned, he transfers in from New Mexico too. They got some studs offensively. They're going to be some fun football games to watch. I just think they're also going to have to put up 35 to 40 points to win games in this conference.
Yeah, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. This Cal offense is going to be electric. It's going to be worth staying up, to 10:30 Eastern time to be able to watch them when they are on the West Coast. JKS at quarterback is one of the most electric quarterbacks in the country. Nearly 3,500 yards, 18 touchdowns. He has retained some thought with the coaching turnover that he was going to be able to leave. Reportedly, Tosh Rapoy, as soon as he signed the contract with Cal, he got on a flight to Hawaii and convinced JKS to stay. So, I mean, gotta love that. Your coach is committed to do anything at all costs to be able to keep your starting quarterback on your roster. Ashton Emery, as you mentioned, is inserted in the backfield alongside Adam Muhammad. So I like that running back duo. Carter Vargas is another name to watch out for in the running back room. Comes from UCD. Nearly 450 yards on the ground with 5 touchdowns. So I think that's definitely a name to also look out for. Chase Hendricks, Ian Strong, going to be a dynamic duo at receiver. The offensive line, they returned 3 starters from that group last season. The main name I'm looking out for in the additions is Khalid Tafai. Comes in from Minnesota, graded out pretty well, especially in his run blocking. So I'm looking forward to watching him on the interior of the offensive line for Cal coming in this season. The linebacking room, as you did say, is going to take a hit with the 2 names that they did lose, Farrelly and yeah, you got it. the two backers they are losing are Olave, sorry, they're going to be a huge miss. But Justin Beatles comes in from Louisville. He got some solid game time for the Cardinals last season. Joshua Pierce from North Texas, Solomon Williams from Texas A&M, Kamar Matudi from Oregon, and Emmanuel Okoye from Tennessee. I mean, they have a lot of power forward production that's coming in, from other schools. So I'm curious to see how they get with even more game time under their feet. The secondary is what I'm keeping in my eye out for in this Cal defense. Ricky Fletcher, Groves Killebrew, Daniel Harris, all coming in from Ole Miss, Arizona, and Georgia, respectfully. This secondary is going to be loaded, I think, for the Cal Golden Bears. But I think you prefaced it, Jake. They're going to have to be able to put up 40 points a game. I think they're going to be capable of doing that. I don't think a lot of defenses are going to be able to stop them, at least in conference play. Cal's my number 17. I have him comfortably in the upper half. I think JKS is going to prove that he is a dark horse Heisman contender, especially with the added weapons on the outside. And I think Cal is going to be a comfortable bowl team in 2026. So I have them in the upper tier, but exactly like you said, watch out for them next season, because if they get that defense all squared away, especially in a comfortable Tosh Lupoi system, they're going to be real competitors. So I have them at number 7.
Yeah, and I think if we do see that defensive improvement and the defense overperforms expectations, I mean, it's watch out, right? Because
yeah,
us East Coast guys, especially as you get older like me, where 10:30, you're openly debating whether like, do we regret like going to bed too late? That there are going to be exceptions made to watch Cal football, especially if they're playing at 10:30, because they're going to be a fun watch, regardless of what that record is going to be. At the end of the day, I do think that defense is going to take some time. It might take a year, but I am high on Tosh Lupoi. I really like that hire when it happened, and that was noted in our head coaching tier maker that we did earlier this offseason. There's a lot of concerns that I have, particularly with that linebacking core, but you are obviously a lot higher on Cal than I was. So I'm curious with, who's going to round out, I guess, your bottom 6, right? As we are getting ready to get ourselves closer to the upper half of the ACC.
Yeah, my number 12 team is going to be the Duke Blue Devils. I can't overlook the fact that how much turnover is happening from the roster of last season. Namely, Darian Mensah leaving for Miami. They replace him with Walker Egan, who I think is a very capable replacement. Coming in from San Jose State, over 3,000 yards, 17 touchdowns. He's a very capable passer. Now, who is he throwing the ball to is still left to be decided. But Jared Richardson comes in from Penn, over 1,000-yard receiver, 12 touchdowns. And Javen Nicholas, over 700 yards and 5 touchdowns, comes in from Charlotte. So those are the two standout receivers, one of them from the FCS level. So we'll see how he translates to, obviously, the FBS level in the ACC. Nate Shepard coming back at running back is a huge retention. Over 1,100 yards in the backfield, 11 touchdowns, another near 300 yards in the air out of the backfield. So it's great to keep him in the backfield, get some continuity for sure. The biggest question mark offensively, they only returned 2 starters. Only half of the production from the offensive line group of last season. But Nick Del Grande from Coastal Carolina is a big name to watch out for on the offensive line. He's a tackle, graded out really well in his run blocking and pass blocking at an A- and A+ respectively. So Braden Miller is also another name to watch at tackle, comes in from Cal. But aside from those 2 notable additions, that offensive line is going to be a huge question mark in my eyes for Manny Diaz's squad. Defensively, they retain a lot of the defensive line, which is good. Linebacking core retain a lot. Third, secondary is where they add the most of their production. Sherry, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Sherry from Stanford, over 30 tackles, 2 pass breakups last season. Dylan Flowers from Western Kentucky, 33 tackles, 4 pass breakups, and a touchdown. So they bring in a lot of new production on the secondary, which I think could maybe take a hit, which I think it will. I think I see Duke as another fringe bowl team, similar to Wake Forest. I could see him around the 6 to 7 win range. It really just depends how that offense clicks together. New offensive line, new quarterback, new receivers. And I mean, it was pretty much a fluke that they won their conference last year. So I think they're going to be nowhere close to winning the conference this season. But I think Duke is solidly a bowl team this year. So good rebound spot from Andy Diaz, especially after losing the production of Mensa and Barkate. So I'm going to put the Blue Devils at number 12.
Yeah, and I will say this first and foremost: Duke got screwed, like with the Darian Mensah situation, with how he like originally intended on staying for another year, and then at the 11th hour, Miami threw so much money that even the buyout of that NIL contract didn't even matter, and he was still able to go to the Miami Hurricanes in spite of threatening to sue. So the Duke Blue Devils, first and foremost, from that perspective, they got screwed over, right? Walker Eget, I was excited for him if he was going to be the backup because he is an experienced starter from San Jose State. He was a starter entrusted with having San Jose as not just a team that could make some noise in the Mountain West, but was considered to a degree a darling in the G5 in terms of being that sexy dark horse pick to possibly make the college football playoff. And yes, he did end up throwing 3,000 yards and 17 touchdowns. It's a good statistical season. My concern, though, is that some of those, there's a alarming number of those stats that were done in garbage time when the game was no longer in contention. So now you're seeing him as a starter at an ACC level, and you're going up against better competition overall. So that does worry me. Plus, Javon Nicholas and Jared Richardson, like you talked about, they better step up because losing, as you mentioned, Quayshawn Brown and Cooper Brigake, they're both gone like a girl in a country song. So who's he going to throw the ball to? And who's going to step up? I do think the linebacking core is going to be sneaky good with the addition of John Morris, who transfers in from UConn. That's someone that I circle as someone that could surprise in spring ball and into the summer and be a potential starter for this team. So I do like that. Justin Pickett. I do like the leaders that they have in the trenches with Justin Pickett on the interior offensive line, as well as Aaron Hall, who is someone he goes up against plenty of times in practice. He's an interior defensive lineman. They're both third-team all-conference players. So there's pieces in there. And then, of course, Manny Diaz, I think highly of him as well. Won the ACC last year, and someone where even like his first season, had them sneaking their way into a 9-win season the previous year before last year. So Manny Diaz has figured out how to win at Duke. I think this is going to be his biggest challenge yet. So not much higher for me. I have Duke at number 11 at this time.
Yeah, definitely. They're definitely going to have to take a step up, especially with Walker Eget. It's definitely a step up from San Jose State to playing in the ACC for Duke. But my number 11 spot is open, and I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I've talked about this team before, specifically on Twitter and on my channel, so I'm not going to, add too much on to what I've said about this team before. And hopefully the Twitter audience, gets a good kick out of this because I love bashing on this team. It is Florida State. I have Florida State at number 11. I think, once again, wholesale changes through the portal for Mike Norvell. If he's not on the hot seat now, when does he get back on the hot seat this season? Because I think it does happen again. When is he out? Gus Malzahn is no longer the offensive coordinator there. He is now a part of the college football playoff committee, so good for him. But Florida State, I think, while they do make wholesale changes through the portal again, I can't back Mike Norvell anymore. I think my stock is fully sold on him. Tim Harris comes in as the new offensive coordinator. He is an unproven coordinator. They return no starters on the offensive line. Ashton Daniels is inserted at quarterback from Auburn. He looked okay in his time when he did play for the Tigers last season. I do like the Q Wisner addition at running back. I think that is a great addition alongside Jeremy Sands from Florida Atlantic. Q Wisner, while he did battle some injuries last season, I think his addition from what we saw 2 years ago in the backfield for Texas, that potential is there. He's a proven product from what we've seen from him. So I do like that addition. Deuce Robinson is a huge retention. He could have gone to the NFL draft. He's retained at receiver, 1,000-yard receiver, 6 touchdowns. The dude is 6'6". Like literally, Ashton Daniels, your job's not hard. Just lob it up to Deuce Robinson every play. Like it doesn't matter. Mekhi Danzy, Javon Boggs also returned in the receiver room. They have a handful of pretty good recruits in this class. EJ White is probably the name I'm keeping an eye out for the most. He was a 6'2" receiver out of this past recruiting class. Again, the entire offensive line is new from last season. Xavier Chaplin and Nate Pabst are probably the 2 names I'm looking out for the most on the offensive line, coming in from Bowling Green and Auburn, respectfully. So it's just a patchwork of portal additions, in my opinion. I can't get behind Mike Norvell anymore. He has to prove it to me. And now going into his 7th year, he's only 38-34 as the head coach of Florida State. Florida State is arguably a blue blood of the sport. They should be competing for the ACC year in and year out. And the fact that Mike Norvell is still there is a honest surprise to me. So I'm going to put Florida State just outside the top half at number 11.
Yeah, so I'm actually a little bit higher on Florida State as of right now. They actually come in for me as my number 7 team. So a little bit higher on this Seminoles football team. I still think that there is something in here in this Florida State football program in terms of being able to get to where they need to be. And we saw those flashes last season when they played Alabama. We saw them beat Alabama in the opener. So it's in there. And I think the biggest thing is getting that consistency from his football team. Because if we see that Alabama performance more often, we're talking about a very dangerous football team. So I'm giving them a little bit more benefit of the doubt because I've seen what the ceiling is. And combined with what they brought in from the transfer portal as well, I'm going to believe that they're a little bit closer to that ceiling than maybe what we saw from the floor of this team last year. And it's not just from the quarterback position. Ashton Daniels will likely be the starter, but Dean DeNoble, he transfers in from Lafayette. He had over 2,500 yards. Don't sleep on him now. He could push Ashton Daniels for this starting job if Ashton Daniels is not doing what he's supposed to do. And I think that's important to have in order to remove maybe some of the complacency that we saw after the Alabama win last year, is having that competition, because competition will breed success. It will remove any complacency that is in this program that plagued this football team last year. I think I like what they added in the trenches with Nate Pabst from Bowling Green, offensive tackle for the Falcons last year. He could start. Ditto for Jordan Sanders, who's the defensive lineman for Texas State, who's also another potential starter as well. One high school recruit that I'm looking at is Chuck Kennan, borderline 5-star recruit in this 2026 high school recruiting class. He could play right away, or at least be like a special team / rotational player in that freshman campaign, alongside Naheem Chandler, who comes in from South Alabama, 2 interceptions and 13 pass breakups. And I think Mike Norvell at this point, I think he's understand what he did wrong in the last couple of years and recaptures some of that 2023 magic that they had. Not saying that they're going to the playoff by any things, and not saying that they're going to Charlotte, but I think that we do see Florida State closer to what they should be as a borderline blue blood, where they are, you're looking at them and you think they should be at least competitive in every single game that they play in. So I'm going to, I think Mike Norvell, understands the urgency, and I think he rises to the occasion here. So I'm going with them at number 7.
Yeah, I think they definitely improve on last season, but I don't think they improve enough to get to the top half. Again, somewhere in that Wake Forest Duke range. I see them being a bowl team, 6 wins. Again, my stock is fully sold on Mike Norvell. I can't do it. I can't do it.
Well, and I also couldn't do NC State in my top half of the ACC as well, because I had NC State as my number 10 team. This was a team that was absolutely gutted in the transfer portal this offseason. not just with the NFL player, Justin Jolie, Devin Marshall, and Brandon Cleveland. They're all going to the NFL. That's multiple draft picks that you're going to have to replace. Hollywood Smubbers, who's one of the focal points of your offense. He leaves for Texas. He was an Alabama player for 5 minutes. He's actually a Texas Longhorn. He was a star for NC State and a great backfield mate, and now he's gone. Their 2 top receivers, Terrell Anderson and Noah Rogers, have also left as well. One going to USC and one going to Alabama and actually staying there this time around. And then one of their top offensive linemen, Jacarius Peak, is gone as well. He leaves for South Carolina, could be starting for the South Carolina Gamecocks this fall as well. So there's a lot of talent that they're going to have to bring in, not to mention that Kenny Soares also leaves for Michigan State. Not a star player, but a good player with 80 tackles last season as well. And just looking at what they brought in on the back end, I don't think they did nearly enough to backfill all that talent that they lost. So that's why, even though I do like Dave Doran, I don't love him, but I like him. I think NC State is going to take a step back. But again, I do like the Victor Snow ad. Bringing him in from Buffalo. He was a bright spot on what was an anemic offense for the Bulls last year.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, beyond that, I think this team was good last year, and I think this is a team that you're looking at possibly taking a step back compared to last year, although albeit still a team that can potentially go play in a bowl game.
Yeah, I view him very similarly to you. I have him at number 9 for me personally. Not gonna again point out all the things that you did. I do like the Victor Snow addition at receiver. CJ Bailey back at quarterback, over 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns. Friend of the program, AT, is really high on CJ Bailey in comparison to us. He had him in his top 10 quarterbacks going into next season, which I'm not that high on him, but he definitely has the capabilities to be a very good quarterback once again for NC State. Jaden Scott returns at running back, nearly 600 yards on the ground, 4 touchdowns. Davian Goss comes in from North Carolina, nearly 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. So I think that's a good running mate for Jaden Scott in the backfield. Victor Snow, as we both pointed out. A name I have circled here, Tyron Warren from Alcorn State, over 440 yards receiving, 4 touchdowns. I think he's going to be an immediate impact player. And Josiah Trader coming in from Miami. Didn't get a ton of game time for Miami, but when he did, he nearly averaged 14 yards per reception. So he is a big play potential player for this North Carolina State offense. The offensive line, again, I have questions about it, similar to other teams. They only returned 2 starters from last season, but Jamarion McCrimnon, that's an all-name team if I've ever seen it, comes in from East Carolina. Teague Anderson comes in from, or he was there last season, excuse me. Jylun Hampton, I think I said that right. He comes in from UT Martin. So the additions that they did make on the offensive line, I think, are going to be capable enough to, fill in the shoes of who they lost from last season. But again, I see North Carolina State being a solid middle of the pack team. Definitely have potential to be a bowl team. Raul Aguirre Jr., I think I'm pronouncing that right, 43 tackles last season in a pass breakup for Miami inserted into the linebacker group. I think is going to be a good addition alongside with Harvey Dyson, 31 tackles and another pass breakup, 7 sacks from the linebacker position for Tulane last season. So I think they're going to have some bright spots. It's just, do they all mesh together to project NC State to a top half finish in the ACC this season? We both don't think so, but I think Dave Doran, in now going his 14th year, didn't expect he was there that long. I didn't realize that. I think NC State, this is just a pretty average year in my eyes, so I have him at number 9.
Yeah, and I like Dave Doran dating back to when he was the head coach of Northern Illinois. That's where he came from to become the head coach of his NC State team, and was responsible to leading the Huskies to a New Year's Six bowl under the Jordan Lynch era. So they're a fun back of the day. I like CJ Lynch, and I'm like not as high as, I wouldn't say he's part of my top 10, but I love watching him play though. He is an exciting person to watch, but I think the talent around him has diminished. So, I mean, like you said, middle of the pack team. I think they're going to be fine, but I think they lost too much to
Yeah.
be a part of that premier title threat
Hmm.
group per se. But I know I still have my number 9, so you can almost say the same thing about this next team on this list. Georgia Tech comes in next for me as my
Yeah.
number 9 team on this list. First and foremost, you have to figure out how to lose Haynes King. Maybe not the best pure passer in the world, but just one of the best competitors and best athletes that I think the ACC had at the quarterback position last year. So you have to figure out how to replace Haynes King among 4 other players that are going to the NFL, whether it's Eric Rivers, Amari Harvey, who's a corner, Jamal Haynes, who was Haynes King's backfield mate. He's gone as well. And then Keelan Rutledge, who was an interior offensive lineman, helped out quite a bit at the line of scrimmage. Plus, I didn't even get to the transfer portal either with Isaiah Cannon. He transfers to Georgia. So in the battle of good old-fashioned hate, he goes to the dark side and joins the Georgia Bulldogs this upcoming fall. But unlike NC State, and why I have them a little bit higher than the Wolfpack, I did think at least the Yellow Jackets did a better job than in replacing that talent than NC State did. Really like the Justice Haynes ad. He transfers from Michigan. Jalen Mbakwe could be a starting wide receiver for this Yellow Jackets team. He transfers from Alabama. Noah Carter, starting caliber edge rusher. He ends up coming in, I believe, Alabama. I have a different name here listed, which I know is not right, but I'm not fully sure where Noah Carter comes from, but he's joining this team as well. The tight end position could be an interesting battle there for tight end 1. You have a battle between Gavin Harris, who transfers from New Mexico State, and Chris Corbo, who transfers from Dartmouth. So some weapons to work with for presumably Alberto Mendoza, who is going to start. If he's 90% of Fernando Mendoza, this is a very dangerous football team, but we don't know what to expect from Alberto Mendoza. What he did in mop-up duty was promising, but it's different being a mop-up reliever when you're blowing a team out by 30 to 40 points and you're playing against likely backups as well.
Yeah.
And playing actual full-time starters, plus the coaching staff has more film on you. So that's going to be a jump for Alberto Mendoza. I'm curious to see how it works out. Could be a Haynes King equivalent. We'll see. But just quite a bit of questions here right now for this Georgia Tech football team.
Yeah, definitely. That's the biggest question mark for Georgia Tech offensively. Just to preface, I have him at number 8, so I kind of view him similarly to you. Alberto Mendoza is the biggest question mark, but what is not a question mark is that backfield, Malachi Hosley and Justice Haynes. They're going to be a dynamic duo, similar to what we saw with Hosley and Haynes last season. Jamal Haynes. Justice Haynes, I think, is a huge addition coming in from Michigan. Nearly 900 yards, 10 touchdowns, ended up getting hurt. But I think from what you've seen from him at Alabama and Michigan, he's a proven product. He's proven production. I think that's going to be a massive addition to the backfield. A name I was looking out for in the receiver room, Isaiah Furman, over 900 yards receiving, comes in from Elon, 9 touchdowns. Big name to watch out for Alberto Mendoza, his weapons on the outside. That tight end room, I did circle Harrison Corbo battling it out like Corbo. Dartmouth? Okay. Going to Georgia Tech, it's also a technical institute, so that's a smart kid. Offensive line is going to be a question mark for me. They only retained 2 starters from last season. The additions are okay on paper from what they made in the portal. So huge question mark for me on the offensive line. Jordan Walker on the defensive line is going to be a huge addition for me. Comes in from Rutgers, 25 tackles, 3 tackles for loss and a sack, as well as Tajay McCoy, 21 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, comes in from Oklahoma State. So I think those are 2 players to watch out for in the defensive line. I think Georgia Tech, if they can moderately replace the production that they had last season, not saying that they live up to that potential for Brent Key in year 5, but I think I love Brent Key as a head coach. I think if he just stabilizes the ship, keeps it pointing in the right direction, you don't completely collapse from what you did last season. Keep Georgia Tech as a bowl team in 2026. Keep Georgia Tech going in the right direction. I like Brent Key, Georgia Tech, number 8 for me in 2026.
Yeah, and it actually turns out, as I'm reading like from my personal notes as well, is like so I actually misread my ranking. So I actually had Georgia Tech at number 8 as well. So I'm actually in line with you. I just, not because I copied you, it's just because I'm stupid and I cannot count. So that's the so but still, I mean, like, very, feeling the exact same way that you are, Reed. So let me go ahead and jump into who's actually my number 9 team. We still have that open because I don't know how to count, apparently. I guess I need to go back to Lamondola Elementary School or something. So I do have the Virginia Cavaliers coming in as my number 9 team going into this season. Listen, this was an incredible year for Tony Elliott. I'm just curious to see if this is going to be a type of year where you're looking at it and, was this a genie in a bottle type deal, or is this something to expect from Virginia moving forward? Because yes, this team ended up with double-digit wins. They win 10 games and they end up going to the ACC title game. But kind of similar to Wake Forest, talking about them earlier tonight, Virginia was also the beneficiary of being able to have some breaks go their way, because there was quite a few games where Virginia absolutely could have lost, whether it was the overtime game against Florida State that really could have gone in either direction. Washington State as well gave Virginia a really good scare, especially when Virginia was ranked in the top 25. And then North Carolina went for a 2-point conversion in overtime. It was half a yard short. So there was moments like that where Virginia was very close to blowing it and suffering a inexplicable loss, but they just didn't, and they found a way to win. And I want to give them credit for that. So I'm curious if this is a little bit more of a return to the mean, but not as bad as a Wake Forest, because they do have more returning 5 all-conference guys that is going to be back for this football team, including notably Daniel Sparks, who's the punter. So special teams should be pretty good for Virginia this upcoming season. And they added a lot in the transfer portal. I'm gonna leave you to some of these names because it's a long list of names that they added. Particularly the quarterback position between Eli Holstein, who got benched in the middle of the year, and Bo Pribula, who was doing okay, but then he has some injury issues as well. So he brought in 2 starting caliber quarterbacks, but it's still a little bit of a question mark, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm thinking there might be a little bit of a return to the mean with Virginia, but if it's not, I mean, Tony Elliott could absolutely make some things shake here in 2026. The pieces are there. It's just, are they going to have a similar type of, or the football gods going to bless them in a somewhat similar way? That's kind of my question.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of regression from last season, but not as much as you view Virginia having. I have Virginia at number 5.
Okay.
I have Virginia cracking my top 5. I think I'm a huge Bo Pribula guy. I mean, not just because he did play Penn State. I think in what he has shown at Penn State and Missouri, he's a very capable quarterback on both in the air and on the ground. The biggest thing he has to improve on from last season, I'm touting him as the starter as of right now, but if he is to be the starter, he has to limit the turnovers. 9 interceptions and 6 fumbles last season. He has to reduce the turnovers, but then again, Eli Holstein has shown he's been a very capable quarterback as well in his time at Pitt. So those are, I mean, could they do a potential, I don't know what you would call it, like a rotation system, like they alternate drives or something? I don't know. Or situation wise, I definitely think they could both get playing time. I'm not going to lie. Jaquale Middlebrook is a huge addition in the backfield, comes in from Middle Tennessee State, nearly 800 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns, another 400 receiving, 3 touchdowns. I think that's a huge addition in the backfield alongside Solomon Beebe from UAB and Peyton Lewis from Tennessee. They both got good amounts of production at both of those schools as well. Jaquan Gibson is a name to look out for at the receiver room. Comes in from Massachusetts. Shout out the Curse of You. Over 600 yards on Twitter, or over 600 yards through the air for Jaquan Gibson. I think he's going to be a name to look out for in this receiver group, alongside incoming Rico Flores from UCLA, Deshaun Martin from Kent State, and Tyson Davis from Central Michigan. The offensive line, they retained 3 starters. And I think having a pretty good chunk of continuity is going to benefit them. Alex Payne is a name to look out for. He's a sophomore, transfers in from USC on the offensive line. I think that's going to be a huge addition. Potential to be a starter in this group coming into 2026. Ezekiel Larry on the defensive line is a name to look out for. Comes in from Yale. As we've prefaced with a lot of other Ivy League additions to other schools so far tonight, another one here with Ezekiel Larry on the defensive line for UVA. Matthew Fobbs White comes in from Baylor, 19 tackles and a tackle for loss. And Anyawamu from UTSA, 21 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 5 sacks for the Roadrunners last season, also on the defensive line. So I think UVA regresses a little bit from last season, but I think Tony Elliott showed last season, even though, as you said, a couple of the games that they did win were, some would say, flukes last season, as you pointed out, Jake. But I think UVA is back going in the right direction with Tony Elliott. I project them as a 8-win team. So I think they can handle the lower teams that we've talked about already tonight. And I view UVA in my top 5. I'm really high on Tony Elliott. He was on my hot seat last year, and I think he proved a lot to me. I'm not going to lie. I'm back on the Tony Elliott train. So I'm going to have the Cavaliers at number 5.
Yeah, and there's certainly, I do really like their transfer portal class. Don't get me wrong. But it's not just for me. It's because they did have some luck go their way that I'm a little bit concerned if they're going to have that similar kind of luck 2 years in a row. But when you're bringing in that many notable transfer portal figures, how is that all going to mesh? There's a lot of good individuals on that football team. Does it become a football team, right? Or does it become a collection of really good players like what we saw similar to a Florida State, where we see there's a lot of talent on that Seminoles roster, but they don't play like a team, which is why they sucked last season, or they fell short of expectations even after it was recalibrated. So we're getting ready to jump into the top 5, but before we get into this top 5 officially, though, Reed, I mean, we're on the verge. You still have one team outside of your top 5 that you haven't revealed yet. So number 6, man, who's going to be that last team that lies outside of your top 5, but you still really like going into the season?
Yeah, the team I'm probably the most excited for going into 2026. It's the Virginia Tech Hokies. Under the new direction of James Franklin, of course, the debacle of his time at Penn State. He's now in a new spot in Blacksburg, Virginia, brings a ton of the production and recruits from Penn State over to Blacksburg. And I think that's going to translate to a positive year in his first year in Blacksburg. Ethan Grunkemeyer comes in as quarterback. He did fill in when Drew Auer went down to a season-ending injury. Nearly 1,400 yards passing, 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions for Grunk. Bill Davis is a name to look out for in the backfield. Comes in from Louisiana Lafayette, 760 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns. He's going to be the main back in the backfield for the Hokies, alongside Marcellus Hawkins, who does return this season. Aiden Green is probably the name to look out for in the receiver group. 500 yards last season, 3 touchdowns. He's retained alongside incoming Quayshawn Brown from Duke. As we talked about earlier when we were discussing Duke, nearly 850 yards receiving, 5 touchdowns. That's massive. That's a massive insertion for this Virginia Tech receiver group. The offensive line, while they retained 4 starters from last season, which is really good considering everything that did happen in Virginia Tech last season, to be able to retain 4 starters on the offensive line is huge. Now the question is, can they improve off last season, because they weren't the best unit altogether last season, is a question to be answered. On the defensive side, Malachi Williams comes in from Penn State. Samuel Okunlola from Colorado. Javion Hilson from Missouri, Cortez Harris from Penn State. Just a good chunk of players coming in on the defensive line that were transfers, but the main name to look out for, Kamari Copeland, does return at interior defensive tackle. 48 tackles last season, 8 tackles for loss, 5 sacks for this Virginia Tech defensive front, I think is huge to retain him. The linebacker group pretty much is the same from last season. Caleb Spencer, Noah Chambers do return. Curtis Jones is inserted from West Virginia, 22 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and 2 pass breakups. Keon Wiley, who was a fan favorite at Penn State, 28 tackles, 3 tackles for loss. In the secondary has a lot to be desired as well. Jacquez White from Troy, Cam Chadwick from Connecticut, Isaiah Brown Murray from Eastern Carolina. He was there last season, but 39 tackles, retaining that. 5 pass breakups, I think, is also huge to retain that on the back end. So Virginia Tech, probably the most exciting team I'm going to watch for in the ACC this season and going forward. Really high on them with James Franklin at the helm. He's still a really good head coach, and they come in at number 6 for me.
Yeah, and I had them a little bit higher, seeing as I didn't even fill out my top 5, or at least even start to fill out my top 5. So they do come in as number 5 for me. I do like this Virginia Tech football team going into this year. And you talked a lot about the guys that they added, which they're going to be exciting guys to watch. I'm particularly excited to see how James Franklin does it in Blacksburgs. I think this is a really good landing spot for him. Someone that was a former conference champion, as well as someone that led a team to a college football playoff. So being able to have someone that has experience in winning both the Big Ten and going to the college football playoff, I think that's really good. That's a huge coaching upgrade compared to what they had this time last year. The one thing that gives me pause, which is why I didn't have Virginia Tech higher than number 5, in spite of everything that I am excited about, you are talking about a team that, according to the SB Plus rankings submitted by Bill Connolly, they returned 65 to 70% of a team that went 3-9 last year. So there is a lot of there is some hoping, while at key positions, you're filling with transfers. There's a lot of you're hoping that the people in the building also get better too. So that's why I have a little bit of pause, but there's a lot of like still about this Virginia Tech football team going into the new year.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think they're one of the most just fascinating teams to watch in all of college football next season, just solely because of what James Franklin did at Penn State, and if that is immediately going to translate or if that's going to take some time. But I think Virginia Tech definitely is going to be back going in the right direction in his tenure for sure.
Yeah, and can you imagine if we had Penn State versus Virginia Tech in the college football playoff? That would be just instant cinema. That I would love to see happen. Not saying that Virginia Tech is going to be a playoff team, but if we got that somehow, that would be some incredible cinema to watch from a storyline perspective. But moving on forward to who I have at number 4, I do have the Louisville Cardinals coming in next. So very excited to see the Louisville Cardinals make an appearance here. So interesting thing about Louisville, right, is I really, first and foremost, we have an incredible head coach on our hands out there in Louisville, Kentucky, Jeff Brom, who does a fantastic job year in and year out. This is even dated back to when he was coaching at Western Kentucky, when he was leading them to multiple CUSA titles. So Jeff Brom, he is a commodity that has proven himself everywhere that he's gone, whether it's Western Kentucky, whether it's Purdue, whether it's at Louisville. They have some. He's done an incredible job everywhere that he's gone, his alma mater included. They also got multiple all-conference guys back. Isaac Brown at the running back position, and then a couple of really stud defenders in Clave Lubin and TJ Quinn, part of that front 7 for that Louisville defense. They're both going to be back as well, so I'm very excited to see them. Quarterback, it's an interesting development at quarterback. Lincoln Kineholtz, who's been the longtime backup at Ohio State, he finally has an opportunity to potentially start for this Louisville football team, and I'm very happy for him. Someone where the first time that he lost a quarterback battle, he could have entered the transfer portal right away. He didn't do that. He stuck it out, so I have a ton of respect for him to do that and waiting till the end of the season to get his shot in terms of not only getting a starting job, but getting a potential QB1 job. And it's a really good destination as well. Jeff Brom's quite the quarterback whisperer. He also added Devin Widener, who transfers from West Georgia. I think is an intriguing add at the quarterback position. Someone that could be a good backup in the event that Keinholz gets hurt or he doesn't perform. Over 2,000 total yards. And then how about that receiving core? That receiving core is going to be fun next year. Trey Richardson, Wayne McCoy, and then Jackson Voth from Drake. Not talking about the rapper Ivor, but the Pioneer League school getting some love as well. He's someone that could potentially be in the mix of being in that starting rotation. Plus Braden Foley, who was one of the best tight ends at the G5 last year. He's now a Louisville Cardinal as well. Defense should be solid as well. I do like the interior defensive lineman that they brought in, and Jared Smith II and Tommy Zesmir. And then Keon and Stringer to round things out, transferring into this Louisville football program, 4 pass breakups and 70 tackles, more of that box safety. So lots to like here. Not a ton of stars outside of Isaac Brown and a couple of key defensive players, but a lot of very good players that know their role, and I think they're going to do their role effectively this upcoming year.
Yeah, I'm a little higher in Louisville. I have them at number 3 for me. I think they're going to be right up at the top, competing to go to Charlotte. I'm not going to lie. I think that's the ceiling that this Louisville team has. I am really high on Lincoln Keinholz coming in this season. I mean, if you're competing for a starting job at Ohio State, you clearly have some capability of being a very capable starting quarterback. It's just we haven't seen that yet because he got beat up by Julian Sayin. So I'm really high on him coming in this season. I think he could be the difference maker. I think he's an upgrade to Miller Moss of last season for Louisville, who he looked to be turnover prone. Isaac Brown and Kayvon Brown in the backfield, dynamic duo. Thunder and Lightning, I think you can't overlook them in the backfield. They're going to be a dynamic duo. The receiver group you pointed out, I'm really keeping an eye out on. Brody Foley, huge name added from Tulsa, 500 yards, 7 touchdowns at tight end. Finding that production from that position is very rare nowadays in the world of college football that we're in. Now, the biggest question mark for me with Louisville, they retain 1 starter on the offensive line. But their additions that they do make through the portal, Kason Henry from South Carolina, Johnny Brown from Georgia Southern, Onwari O'Neal from Delaware, Nair Jackson from Florida International, and Evan Wibberly from Kentucky are probably good enough talents to be able to fill in for the offensive line unit for Louisville next season in front of Lincoln Keinholz. It's just whether that does come to fruition, because if that does come to fruition, I think they're competing to go to Charlotte. I really think that that's the level that Louisville is at. I think this defense retains enough and adds enough to be able to compete as they did last season. And, you know, we've said it time again on the show before. We are both Jeff Brom guys. I'm pretty sure all of our contributors are Jeff Brom guys. We love Jeff Brom on this program. So Jeff Brom,
trust, baby.
So Jeff Brom or Louisville SID, if you're listening, we would love to come meet you. We love you, Jeff Brom. But aside from that, I think this is a fringe team going to Charlotte, if not competing for a at large bid in the playoff. I'm going to say that right now. I think that's their ceiling.
Yeah, and I will say this is a little bit of a spoiler when it comes to Louisville. Candidly, even though I don't have them as a top 2 team in the ACC, from a pure like power ratings and ranking perspective, I do have them tabulated as one of the teams going to Charlotte, alongside the team that ultimately is going to be my number 1 team going into this season. So I am very high with you in terms of this Louisville football team going into this fall. But I am curious, though, with who you have behind Louisville that you still really like, but maybe don't have as high of expectations in terms of those aspirations to make it to Charlotte when December rolls around.
Yeah. Potentially the coach with the most to play for in all of college football this season, in my opinion, it's Dabo Swinney and Clemson. I think this is arguably the biggest season Dabo Swinney's had in a while. I think if he doesn't get Clemson at least to 8-4, I think he's out of there. I'm not going to lie. That's just my opinion, though. But looking at this roster, I think they're going to be competitive this season. Now, they had a really great roster on paper last season and completely bombed out. But Christopher Vizina is finally getting his chance at quarterback. He's been there for a few years now as the backup to Cade Klubnik. He's finally going to get the starting role. Some reports have said that there might be a quarterback battle just based on they already did have their spring game this past weekend. But I think Christopher Vizina is still the starter on paper. Even Dabo said himself, it's Vizina and then a gap. So I think Vizina going into the fall is touted as the starter. Gideon Davidson returns at running back, along with an interesting addition of Chris Johnson Jr. Coming over from SMU, nearly 500 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns, 7 yards per carry. He's an explosive back. So he has home run hitting ability out of the backfield. So that's a huge addition, but of the additions they did make, they're not anything crazy. I mean, just me personally, Marcus Strong from Oklahoma is probably another huge addition, but aside from that, they didn't make any notable, additions aside from those two in my eyes for Clemson. TJ Moore, Bryant Wesco are back at receiver. That's good to have continuity there. They only retain one starter on the two starters, on the offensive line. So there's going to be turnover at that position group as well. I think holding on to what was his name? The guy they got from Purdue, Will Helt. I think having Will Helt back on the defensive line is huge. London Merritt's also a notable addition from Colorado, but I mean, it's been a crime Dabo hasn't dabbled into the portal as much as like a program of Clemson's like recognition and notability. You think they would dabble in the portal more, but it just hasn't been his MO. And I think they have the upside of, they have the ceiling of potentially going to Charlotte, but it could be another lackluster year, maybe. But I think they still have that upside to enough to put them at 4 for me.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that Dabo is starting to dabble into the transfer portal a little bit more. Nothing crazy. They only added a few guys that did end up having production, which, as you mentioned, Chris Johnson probably being the biggest notable piece. They did, but most of what they had seemed like was on the defensive side of the ball with CJ Leslie, Courtney Kelly on the defensive line, adding to what Will Height, and then Sammy Brown, the linebacker who was a first team All ACC guy, he was able to do last year. And then the secondary got some improvements from the Sun Belt because they did add Jerome Carter from Old Dominion and Corey Myrick from Southern Miss. That could be a really intriguing safety duo, both guys being particularly athletic in their own right. So I was higher on Clemson than you were. I had them as my number 2 team because I still think on paper this is one of the most talented teams in the conference, and I think the urgency is being felt by Dabo. And I know a lot of people are down on Dabo after what's happened really the last couple of years. But this is still, to me, a top 10 coach in college football. And until he decides to hang it up, he's gonna have my respect, even though I don't have him as they no longer run this conference, and they're gonna be lumped in with all the way to 13, as I mentioned like on the show earlier tonight. But I think the urgency has been felt. I'm gonna believe in Dabo on this one until he decides to hang it up. When he does decide to hang it up, he's going to go to the College Football Hall of Fame. I'm gonna say that right now. Winning multiple national titles. So, until that fat lady sings, I am not leaving the Dabo Swinney ship. I think the defensive coaching is also going to be improved as well, which should be notable because they did make some changes at the coordinator spots as well to try to address some of the coaching issues that they did have. So I like Clemson, and I think Clemson is going to have something to say about who goes to Charlotte at the end of the year.
For sure. They're definitely going to be in the conversation. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and get it onto a team that is slightly behind them. I have the SMU Mustangs coming in as my number 3 team going into this season. Can you imagine a team having as seamless of a transition to the power conference rank as SMU, just thinking what they did the
Yeah.
last couple of years? 2023, they won the American Conference, and then that was their last year in the American. They go to the ACC title game in their first year. They almost win the ACC. They make the college football playoff, anyways. And then even 2025, while it's considered a step back, at the same time, though, I mean, that was still a really good year. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC and Kevin Jennings. I love Kevin Jennings, man. He is an absolute stud muffin out there on the football field. He's going to have a couple of new toys to throw that football to as well. Yannick Smith, who transfers from Eastern Carolina, stud. Theo Malin Ostrom, the tight end from Texas A&M, certified stud. Kendrick Raphael transfers from Cal, over 1,100 yards, stud. And then defensive side of the ball, they add some reinforcements there too. Marquez White, the defensive lineman from UMass, 5 sacks. Jarvis Lee and Jimmy Wyrick also coming from the American Conference as well to shore things up on the secondary. So this SMU football team, man, they while they don't have maybe as high of a margin of error as a Clemson or as a Miami or even maybe a Virginia Tech with the influx of talent that they have, for example, there's a lot of, SMU's got some dudes, and I'm excited to watch SMU football in the fall.
Yeah, it's not even just the roster that we like. We love Rhett Lashley. We love Rhett Lashley.
Yep.
He, I mean, you've talked about it perfectly. To lead a transition from the lower FBS to a power conference level in the ACC, I mean, let's not forget their first year in the conference, they played for the conference championship. Let's not forget that. Rhett Lashley, I think, is a borderline top 15 coach in the sport. And I mean, he's building a roster that's going to compete to go to the ACC championship game. I'm not going to repeat all the names that you said. Just point out a couple that I had circled that might have an impact. Jalen Hale is a transfer receiver coming from Alabama. Didn't get a lot of playing time there at Alabama, but I think he has the high upside to be able to be a good contributor. Randy Pittman Jr. was a good contributor to Florida State in the tight end room. Him and Melvin Orstrom, as you said, are going to be tearing it up. I like both of those tight end additions. They retained 3 starters on the offensive line. Marquez White coming in from UMass is a big addition on the defensive line. 43 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. I mean, that's proven production right there. Ira Singleton is another big addition on the edge coming from South Florida. 17 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. So this SMU team, I mean, you said it, one of the best quarterbacks. Kendrick Raphael is a stud. I'm sad that Cal lost him. I wish Cal had retained him, but at least he's staying in the conference, playing for a really good head coach behind a really good quarterback. The offensive line, if they can all click, adding 2 new starters to that group. A knock I will give them, they are replacing both coordinators. That is a knock that I will put out there, but I think Rhett Lashley is going to be able to gather the troops, put together another really good season for the Mustangs, and I think they just may go back to Charlotte. Once again, I have them as my number 2 team.
Yeah, so and I think there's going to be no surprise of who we have as the number 1 team in the ACC, and I don't like to use this terminology very often, and it's the quintessential and it's not even close. But it feels like Miami is kind of in its in its tier of its own. And I was surprised that they had some mishaps last year where they didn't even go to the ACC title game because this was one of the best teams in the conference last year, and I expect them to be at a point where it's either ACC title or bust. To be honest with you, and it's the Miami Hurricanes, right? There's no sense about it. Mario Cristobal, I think, has figured out how to win in those bigger moments, and that's clear. The biggest question, I think the only question that we have about Miami is can they stop complacency from setting in and just having these losses where you're looking at Miami after the fact and you're asking yourself, how the fuck did you lose those games? Right? That's really the biggest question about Miami football this fall, because I don't really have any major questions with this roster. We know Darian Mensah is an absolute superstar, and those receivers that are going to join Malachi Toney, they're going to be a problem. Cooper Bergake, Verdarius Jacobs from South Carolina, Cam Vaughn from West Virginia. I don't know if there is a secondary in the country that's deep enough to cover all of those receivers.
Yeah.
They also maintain Ahmad Moten, an interior defensive lineman, as well as Mark Fletcher, one of the better running backs in the ACC last year. And then how about some of those defensive reinforcements? Damon Wilson from Missouri, Keon Davis from Nebraska, Omar Forden from Boston College, leaving a program that was so poverty that they don't even fit on the screen right now. They're going to be that bad within the confines of the ACC. And then even some high school players that could step in and play right away. Jackson Cantrell is the most notable 5-star recruit. And then another couple of receivers that could be rotational pieces for you as a true freshman. Samirian Wingo and Mylan Paris, they're both high 4-star recruits. I don't think they're going to start, but they, even with all the pieces at the end in the receiver room, they can still be rotational pieces right away. So I look at this roster, and as long as they maintain the focus, Miami is going to be your ACC champion in the spring. And I don't know if we're going to come off of that at any point in the offseason, but if Miami doesn't win the ACC, what likely happened was they got complacent. They took a team for granted. That has been a problem in the Mario Cristobal era.
Yep.
And that's why they would be on the outside looking in when it comes to conference championship weekend.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point with Miami. If it wasn't clear enough, they're the number one team. And I will say it at least, Jake, they're the number one team, and it's not particularly close. I was actually pulling up their schedule because you did bring up a good point. It is classic Mario Cristobal in his tenure at Miami right now to collapse in the month of November. So I was actually pulling up their schedule to see who they have in the month of November. They actually kick off the month at Notre Dame on November 7th. So that is a huge game, potentially a season-defining game, because you also have road trips to Clemson. At Wake Forest could be a sneaky spot, week 3. You also open up the season all the way on the West Coast at Stanford. So I'm not saying that, I mean, obviously you see where we have Stanford, but open up the season on the West Coast. I'm not gonna, beat around the bush. This Miami team is loaded. It's absolutely loaded. Offense, defense, special teams, coaching staff. Shannon Dawson and Corey Heatherman are one of the best duos at coordinator in the country. I mean, we saw what Corey Heatherman did. He's now going into year 2 as DC. That was just last year. That was just his first year as defensive coordinator coming from Minnesota last season. And you saw what they did in the playoff, and all throughout the season. That defense was elite. I mean, they are losing the 2 main defensive linemen that they did have, but I mean, Damon Wilson, Marquise Lightfoot is back, Scroggins, Pickett, Scott, Moten Sr., Keona Davis comes in from Nebraska, Jarquez Carter comes from Ohio State. It's crazy. It's actually wild to see a roster like this. The only knock I'm giving them, they replace 3 starters on the offensive line. If they can click, which I am fully expecting to do, because under Mario Cristobal's tenure, they've produced very solid offensive line groups. And a name you did point out, Jackson Cantwell, and our Lord and Savior Josh Pate did point out on his show last night that Jackson Cantwell is all of the 6'7", 330 that he is, and even maybe bigger than that. He is apparently a freak of nature at offensive tackle, the number 1 overall player in the class. So yeah, if it's not Miami winning the conference, this is a complete letdown of a season, a complete sham. And their floor is 11-1. Their ceiling is undefeated and playing in Charlotte. So
Yeah, and that's what I'm kind of tracking as well. If they lose multiple games, I mean, it's a disappointment of a year, and
Yeah.
could be seeing them on the outside looking, not only for Charlotte but also for the college football playoff as well. One team that I do think would give them a hard time is Notre Dame, and I want to talk about Notre Dame, even though they're not officially an ACC member, but technically they are with the scheduling agreement. I do think, candidly, if Notre Dame was a member of this conference from a football perspective officially, I would have Notre Dame ahead of every one of the teams that we
Yeah.
include, because not only were they extremely close to making the college football playoff, but they also have an extreme number of returning production coming back as well. So that's something that I did want to add, because I know that's on Miami's schedule in particular. One game to definitely keep an eye out for as well, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, they had, and I could be thinking of Notre Dame as well. So if I am, that's an oopsie on my part. But I believe that they possibly go and play against BYU. I could be thinking of Notre Dame, so that's something to watch
That's
out
Notre
for.
Dame. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something to watch out for if you're a Notre Dame guy. That Miami game and the BYU game. If you're going to make the playoff, I think you're going to have to win at least one of those games, because we talked about their strength of schedule before, when the ACC schedule first came out. And it might have been when we did a whole show dedicated to the Power Conference
Mhm.
as a whole, when all of our schedules were released around the same time. Love that for them. The strength of schedule is not very good for Notre Dame. So if you want to make the playoff, you have to beat either Miami and BYU. I don't know if you're going to be able to be 10-2 and sneak your way in like they almost did
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah. And I mean, they go to BYU, which I think is really interesting. I mean, we've seen BYU be a tough place to play over the last few years and throughout their history. So, I mean, those are the two games, at least for Notre Dame, you have to circle: Miami and BYU. Yeah, I mean, if Notre Dame was in the ACC, an official ACC member in football, they would probably be my number one team as well. I'd probably give them a slight edge over Miami. I think their rosters actually do match up pretty well, especially now at the quarterback position. CJ Carr against Darian Mensah would be absolute cinema. So, but I'm glad we get that matchup once again, November 7th, Notre Dame, Miami. I'm going to be nowhere else except in front of a TV at that time. So count me in.
Listen, it doesn't matter whether it's a birth of another child for me, or whether it's turning down the warm touch of a woman in order to watch this football game. I'm going to sit down and watch Miami and Notre Dame, and nothing is going to distract me from that experience. So
Yes.
I'm very excited about that game. So it's interesting to see what we get from Notre Dame. We think that Notre Dame is at least going to be a top 25 team this year. I think that's the floor. If they fell outside of the top 25 at any point, that would be a surprise for sure. But certainly a team that not only is a playoff caliber team, but it's going to be a national championship contender, as is the Miami Hurricanes. So that's going to be a big time matchup to watch, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, one more thing I did want to point out, because I did finalize my preseason model this morning. Boston College was actually rated as the lowest ranked Power 4 team.
Okay.
Just wanted to throw that out there. I had them at 93 out of all 138 teams. So
wow, in the 90s?
They were, yeah. They're below teams like Western Michigan, Washington State, North Dakota State, Tulsa, Kennesaw State. So yeah, I thought that was very, very surprising.
Yeah, because I mean, I had Boston College like down there for sure in terms of the P4s. I mean, I had like one power conference team a little bit lower than Boston College, but I mean, certainly the same thought process when it came down to how it might be a tough time for Boston College. But that's intriguing, just from that perspective. But yeah, we'll go ahead and end on that note. Appreciate everybody sitting through and listening to not only Midwestern institution that is the Midwest in the MAC schedule reveal, since we actually have that schedule now. But also just sitting back and listening to 2+ hours of ACC football. I mean, just what a wonderful time to be alive, man. Reed, you got any final thoughts before we sign off here tonight, my man?
Eat shit, Pitt. I don't know. No, that's not a way to end that. I don't know. I'm good.
Yeah, I was gonna make it onto like a Pitt hype video. So
clip it. I dare you, Pat. Pat, I dare you to clip it and use it for your team.
Well, it wouldn't be him in the big 2026. It'd probably be some like video intern, but I digress. But hey, really appreciate you guys sitting back and listening to some ACC football, trying to provide some of that March content that the people are yearning for. So if you enjoyed this breakdown of the ACC, you can definitely let us know by hitting that like button, as well as hitting that subscribe button as well, if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. But with that being said, this is Jake from College Football Red Zone, joined by my co-host Reed Napper over at Love for the Game podcast. You can find his stuff over on Twitter and on YouTube as well. That's his handle. But with that being said, this is Jake from College Football Red Zone signing off. Hoping you guys are all out there having a good night. Take care, everybody.